shiny red button and we pressed it and forgot what it did.
Hello everyone and welcome back to this newest edition of Aeronautica. This is Remrace from 40k Theories.
Hi, and this is Fiaura, the crazy engineer who gets stuck in a wind tunnel for you guys.
And today we're going to take a look at the aircraft of the Tau Empire, which on initial look looks promising. They look aerodynamic enough, judging from an initial glance. So, do you want to go through your disclaimer?
Yes, I have to go through my disclaimer. Okay, I'm going to approach all of these vehicles as follows. I need to see how well they can potentially fly, what they can do to maneuver, and avoid damage during flight. In addition to this, we're going to take a look at their armament and what it is capable of using real-world physics as the basis for determining what that armament can actually do to something. Lastly, we're going to see how well they take a direct hit. Both how well the armor is sloped, if it has any armor at all, and how well it would react to getting shot. During this, I want to also look at their utility a little bit and and how possible the claims are of what the aircraft can do versus what physics says. Please understand that we did take a model from a Games Workshop store, someone who owns a model, or I had a 3D plastic print made for these models to be placed into a wind tunnel at the University of Delaware in the engineering department. This is done at expense to me of $50 per hour, so it's about $50 an episode. And I cannot actually pay for the recording equipment that they require me to use because it's $400 to record your session with their recording equipment, sadly. And I would like not to break my agreements that I sign off with them. So, all of this said, we are going to move into the Tau vehicles now. We're already on Tau?
We are on Tau, yes. And we're going to start things off by taking a look at the Barracuda. Now, the Barracuda is the Tau equivalent to the Imperial Navy's Marauder or Thunderbolt fighter. Now, in a dogfight, it's supposedly very closely matched to the Thunderbolt, but the Barracuda has an edge in maneuverability. In regards to this as well, the Barracuda also is fitted with sophisticated electronics to aid the pilot's own natural talents. Now, the craft is armed with a nose-mounted ion cannon, and it's the primary weapon of choice used in dogfights, but it's also backed up by two drone-controlled burst cannons in the wings. It also makes use of 4 Seeker missiles, which are not aimed by the pilot, but in fact by a Marker operator on the ground. And in addition, all Barracudas are equipped with escape pods in the event that the aircraft sustains serious damage.
Okay, according to the information I have on this aircraft, it's supposed to be 14.1 meters long from nose to tail. It says it has the width of the aircraft at the wingspan is 11.8 meters. However, the wingspan only consists of 4 of those meters. With that wingspan and weighing 7 tons according to the specs provided, this aircraft can't fly. Period. The thickness of the underbelly is 5.85 meters, roughly, and it diverts air that attempts to pass over the wings, away from the wings, and away from the aircraft itself, or up over it. This means that without the air actively being funneled underneath the aircraft to create the pressure waves that would be required to generate lift, it can't fly. Wind tunnel-wise, we could not get any lift-to-drag ratios because of how the air currents interact with its design. The air simply did not go underneath the wings to give us any idea of what it was capable of doing. So little of the air was traced going under the wings that we doubted that it was actually flying. Rather, it was applying downforce to stay glued to the ground at high speed. This aircraft will never fly. No matter how big the engine is, it will just flip over or roll before it lifts off. I'm sorry, but the Tau are not on a strong start with the Barracuda's inability to fly. Firepower-wise, this is more a torpedo bomber design than a pure fighter. The drone-controlled turrets act as a point defense system during a dogfight so the pilot can continue the attack upon the ground. But the ion cannon isn't rapid fire enough to warrant a dogfighting weapon. For a vessel that relies on its gun for dogfighting, it's the opposite of a dogfighting weapon. It's more an anti-ground or anti-fortification rather than a dogfight. Dogfight weapons, you want them to be rapid fire or weapons that can track their target beyond the point of firing. The ion cannon does neither of these things. It
What
does
about the
not.
burst cannons?
The burst cannons are useful for point defense, but for their caliber and capability, and since they're controlled exclusively by drones, which statistically have worse aiming capabilities than the manual controlled operators, they're not suited for continuous dogfighting. They're suited more for if something is coming in to attack you and you need a point defense weapon.
I see.
In addition to this, the ion cannon doesn't travel fast enough to be considered a air-to-air weapon. It only travels at 1,100 meters a second. Most air-to-air machine gun rounds travel at over 2,000 meters a second. And it doesn't track beyond the pilot's manual ability to aim it. So, dogfighter, no. Just no. It's a ground attack aircraft. It feels more like it's designed strictly as a ground attack aircraft. Protection-wise, this is the first aircraft we've seen that has an escape pod or even an ejection system at all. Even
So
the
that's
Eldar,
something.
whose reproduction rate is no, don't seem to have thought to maybe put an ejector seat in.
Well, the Orcs, why are the Orcs going to waste their time building an ejector seat?
True, but the Imperial Space Marines apparently didn't think to do this either. Lucky for Tau pilots, they actually planned for getting shot down. Second, the air intakes are on top of the aircraft. We've gone over this before. There are two reasons you don't put them up there. One, the air is supposed to be pushed under the aircraft to generate lift. In this case, it doesn't actually get pushed under or over the aircraft. It gets pushed out to the side. Second, the being on top of the aircraft makes it more vulnerable because any pilot who's worth the salt will be engaging their enemy from above. Meanwhile, you as the pilot will be turning the aircraft and pulling up, since the elevators on an aircraft are stronger when pulling up than when trying to pull down. Armor-wise, it does have some protection. It also seems to have vast amounts of unnecessary metal and armor plating. The Barracuda has armor sloping, similar to what you would find on the Hammerhead tank. This means that it could potentially respond to a hit as well as an Orc aircraft, which is impressive. But overall, it would crash to the ground faster and harder than the space shuttle.
Not a good start. Not a good start.
Sadly.
Let's see if they can do better with the second craft, the Manta. Now, this is probably the closest thing we're going to take a look at in this series that's close to a spacecraft, because it's essentially a cross between a spacecraft and an attack craft. Now, these things are used for transport and for, well, gunning as well, gunning down enemies, armed with two heavy railguns located in each wing, massive weapons which can destroy an unshielded Warhound Titan in a single shot. Besides those, there can also... start again. Besides the standard round these railguns can fire, they can also fire special sub-munitions, which are given drone-level intelligence to direct the shell to the target, which is useful in a ground support role. Now, in addition, this thing is also a transport. It can carry an entire Hunter Kader straight into battle, with two transport decks. The upper deck being able to carry 48 Fire Warriors, and the lower deck able to carry... How much was it again? Quite a lot. Try to find the thing.
48 drones and 4 tanks, as well as 2 crisis teams.
Yeah, and also up to 145 Fire Warriors. So,
yeah.
As well as in addition to the heavy railguns, it also has 6 ion cannons and 10 Seeker missiles, weighing in at an absolutely massive 382 tons. And not only that, it's also protected by a energy shield similar to those deflector shields found on Tau spacecraft.
At first glance, the Manta looks like a flying wing, except when you look underneath it and see the sheer size of its thick underbelly. You realize it has incredibly short, stubby wings. Lift generation is a problem. However, unlike the Barracuda, there is enough wingspan here, and the wings are angled properly to force air underneath them to actually generate some lift. The issue here, however, is that the nose is angled down, generating negative lift. Overall, the aircraft at 400 kilometers an hour has a lift-to-drag ratio of 1.98. This means the Manta can fly, but it's going to require an incredible amount of thrust to get off the ground and maintain level flight. With its current dimensions and weight of 382 tons, we're going to figure that out. Taking the weight of 382 tons, multiplying it by 1.98, its lift-to-drag ratio, times the rate of gravity, 9.8 meters per second, times 1,000 to convert from tons to regular kilograms, we find that the Manta requires 7,412,328 newtons of force to fly. This is equivalent to 7,413 kilonewtons, or 0.755 kilotons of force. Which means it requires the same amount of force to fly as the destructive force of 2 Tomahawk cruise missiles.
Yeah.
Well, not
that's a lot of force.
Not nearly as destructive as some of the other aircraft we have seen. This would quite easily decimate the landing zone or generate the same force winds that you would encounter from a tropical storm, a literal level 1 tropical storm hurricane. I'm not saying it won't fly. It will fly. However, I am saying you may run into issues when it comes to keeping that flight a constant thing without experienced engineers to make a runway that can withstand direct hits from cruise missiles, as well as pilots who know what they're doing so they avoid leveling the entire neighborhood as they take off.
In fairness, if you land it in the middle of the enemy and then take off again, you've basically wiped out half the enemy army just by lifting off.
That's not untrue. I am also going to say that do not expect this thing to be graceful or agile by any stretch of the imagination. The rough turning circle of the aircraft to pull a 180-degree turn at its maximum speed, which we estimated out to be 822 kilometers an hour before the frame would rip apart, is 41.1 kilometers.
What?
It takes 41 kilometers to turn around.
Huh.
At 1 degree per second, because its maximum speed is so low. But remember, it's going to take it 180 seconds to turn the hell around. 3 full minutes to turn around.
Yeah, not the most graceful thing. They should have named it the Manta. They should have named it the bloody whale.
Firepower-wise, this aircraft has the most impressive firepower to date. The twin-linked dual rail guns are the same caliber as 18-inch guns at 440 millimeters in diameter. This means that the modern railgun we see mounted on select U.S. destroyers firing a 5-inch gun has the destructive force of 377 megajoules, or roughly 17 megajoules higher than a 16-inch battleship cannon. A railgun of this size would fire a projectile with a mass of 2,225 kilograms at a velocity of 2,500 meters per second. Mach 7, by the way, is what that velocity is.
Yeah.
And would deliver a force of 3,062,500 newtons. This means each one of those is impacting with the same force of half a ton of dynamite. To illustrate how much TNT that is literally taking the entire U.S. 7th Fleet from World War II and all of it firing a single volley at the same spot.
Yeah.
This is in addition to the point defense drone burst cannons, the ion cannons, and the seeker missiles for spike purposes. I think even the orcs would look up and go, "That's a lot of DACA. How did you fit it on a plane?"
Until the orcs get hold of one, loot it, and they fit even more DACA on it.
I would believe it. Armor protection-wise, it is armored, but only for the crew. The soldier areas and the vehicle bay actually only have 20 millimeters of armor on the exit doors.
Is that all?
Yes. The rest of the aircraft is armored with over 180 millimeters of actual armor plating. 182.2 millimeters to be precise, using scaling of 140 of the scale and actually taking the thing apart and measuring. Yes, we actually got a hold of a Manta model, and the person let us take bits of it off to do measurements.
What a brave man.
He was there for the entire testing.
I don't blame him. Do you know how much these models cost? They're like over
A
a
Manta
grand.
is 1,400 pounds, or roughly 2,000 US dollars. So everyone say thank you to Stephen Yates for his excellent donation of a Manta.
Thank you, Stephen.
Further, due to its sheer size, pending a wing being sheared off or the engine destroyed, the Manta could probably take quite a few hits. This would be similar to the Hind D, which is referred to as the flying tank, because multiple Hinds that were in the Afghanistan operations with Russia were reported to have come back having taken 12 or even 13 direct hits from Stinger anti-aircraft missiles and continued to fly. Lastly, this is the only aircraft that we've been introduced to that has the capability of hyperspace. It does not require support craft to function for this. It doesn't require a mothership. It just decides, I'm going to planet X right now.
Now, while we have looked at some craft that are capable of void flight, it's not in the same league.
No, there are some aircraft that are capable of void flight, yes. But we're talking about them not just going from planet to planet. We're talking about them going from system to system. Literally, they are the only aircraft that we have talked about so far that is actually capable of going into the Tau version of hyperspace, which it turns out is not the warp.
Nope.
Without need of a mothership. Whereas all the other aircraft will have to dock up and enter the warp and go through that. The Tau aircraft apparently have some hyperspace folding technology. That's an entire new theory and an entire another debate. Congratulations to the Tau for having actually made a tactically flexible aircraft despite the fact it's the size of a whale.
And blows up everything as soon as you take off.
Well, you did say the LZ was hot.
Yeah, not molten, though.
Along with more firepower than I have ever seen proposed to be mounted on an aircraft that actually flies. It actually flies, it just is going to take a lot to get off the ground.
So they kind of redeemed themselves from the Barracuda to the Manta then.
And prepare to have them fail all over again.
So we're taking a look at the Orca dropship. Dropship, rather. There probably is a drop shit if it's that bad.
I love the Freudian slip, but go on.
I think I broke Fiaura.
Go
Now, the
on.
Orca dropship is the dedicated orbital transport vehicle of the Tau Empire used for moving equipment, supplies, and troops from orbiting spacecraft to a planet's surface. It is not a combat vessel, as its weapons are for self-defense only. Now, the ship can be fitted with up to 4 Seeker missiles to provide support for Mark-equipped ground forces, and also features a pop-down turret located on the bottom of the vessel holding twin-linked long-barreled burst cannons, along with a missile pod pre-armed with 7 missiles.
This is the natural evolution of the helicopter and vector thrust you would expect to see in a modern version of a Chinook, or at least something you would expect to replace the Chinook one day. Does it actually fly well? No. It has the aerodynamics of a square football. With a lift-to-drag ratio of 4.01, it's slightly worse than the actual space shuttle.
Oh god.
You would expect this to be compensated for by vector thrusting engines, however, they're directly in line with each other, which creates a whole new problem. The 2 rear engines, yes, both of them, are completely useless in level flight. This is because of how combustion engines work, and their air intakes, they require air to work that is not entirely consistent of the exhaust of other engines. They are literally inhaling carbon monoxide instead of oxygen nitrogen to attempt to ignite and propel themselves, which means that all of their attempts to use those engines are basically going to watch a shitload of fuel leak out the back that didn't get burned. The Orca can't and will not fly. You cannot have a controlled flight without wings with only 2 engines mounted on the front of an aircraft. It would take off, turn its engines to go forward, and immediately the back end would just drop to the ground at the full speed of gravity while the 2 front engines held it up. And as soon as that happened, then the rear engines would kick back in and start propelling it. So it would start going up, up, and away until they realigned the engines. So this doesn't so much fly as act like a controlled artillery shell.
Huh.
This isn't also to consider the fact that it's loaded with troops. At supposedly reaching speeds of 2,000 kilometers, Mach 1.8, the troops inside are going to have a hell of a time while they're flying like an artillery shell through the air. Getting smashed against the back door as it tries to move forward, only to then get slammed into the roof as it starts moving. You don't want this in a troop landing craft. Infantry troops have to be able to get up, do last-minute checks and adjustments, and access their gear freely.
Not to mention, with what you described, I can imagine a lot of Tau Fire Warriors getting airsick.
Mm-hmm. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have jet-propelled troop transports. They're helicopters, or if you look at the C-130, it's got propellers. Why? Because you only want to go so fast when you have people in the back standing up with explosives in their hands.
Yeah.
The level of protection is the same level of protection you would expect to find on a gunship that's going to be landing in a hostile area. It's a little bit more than a combat Huey, but hey, it's enough that you can secure or suppress an LZ while you go in and out. It has more armor than a Tau Hammerhead, by the way. And they're made of the same material.
No, I did not know.
When we took the model in half and actually looked at it and measured it, we then had a hammerhead, my own hammerhead, by the way, that we broke in half and measured it, and it actually has thicker armor than the hammerhead. So congrats, at least you're armored. Even if your flight pattern is like an artillery shell, oh, that's just bad.
I still reckon a Spaceman or Orc aircraft will just ram through it, though.
I'm just imagining some poor guy in a crisis suit getting slammed around his crisis suit at Mach 1.8 in the back of this thing.
Yeah. Poor guy.
Simply put, the Orca is a bad design unless you offset the engines so they're not breathing in each other's air intake. You cannot have an aircraft designed like this and expect it to fly.